cigar, Hank's wife.
Hello everyone! You know what time it is? It's time for another visit to the Koth Corner. I hope you enjoy your stay. With such a large amount of movement of the population, moving to new states, new cities, new communities, it's got me thinking about, well, identity. What does that even mean? Well, a quick Google search says it's the fact of being who or what a person or thing is. Well, what is? I could go on a long rant about how there doesn't seem to be a central identity of the good old US of A, and very well could say the same about each state in general, each community, each fandom, but I don't think it needs to be that broad. We can focus on what makes the identity of oneself. What makes our identity? I think in the context of the 2 episodes of discussion for this video, I will go with this definition. Identity is our sense of who we are as individuals and as members of social groups. I think that's a good way to put it. You can't deny that you or someone you know bases their identifying characteristics around where they're from or what their background is, or very much what their cultural makeup is. In a way, we personify such parameters as if they're beings in themselves, rather than an amalgamation of individuals within those characteristics. Heck, I'm half Mexican, and I often make references to me and my family's penchant for throwing parties, drinking, eating, dancing, drinking. Actually, come to think of it, my Irish half is the same way, just the food isn't as good. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Let's just get to talking about King of the Hill, shall we? The 2 episodes that focus on identity and the existential crisis brought forth when such a thing is being brought into question are Yankee Hankie and Goodbye Normal Jeans. Both of these episodes feature Hank and Peggy going through something of an identity crisis. And just a warning here, you may think my take on the latter episode will be particularly hot, but we'll get to that later. The first episode for discussion is Season 5's episode Yankee Hankie, which opens up with the guys ogling a Texas native license plate on Dale's van. Which, fun fact, do actually exist. The sale of these plates goes to preserving Texas historic sites or the funding of educational programs that teach Texas history. So, kind of strange that Dale has one before Hank would consider it. But moving on, Boomhauer suggests that all 3 of the quote-unquote native Texans should get one, and we get a fun little reminder that Bill is from Louisiana.
No offense, Bill, you being from Loserana.
This leads to Hank looking for his birth certificate as he believes they'll be required, rationalizing,
otherwise you'd have a bunch of Oklahomans trying to get Texas native plates.
That being said, as far as I know, you don't need to provide such a thing to get one. You simply apply for a specialty license plate and select Native Texan, Daughters of the Republic of Texas on the form. But either way, Hank is unable to find it in his own records, so he decides to call his mother.
Your birth certificate? Well, what makes you think I'd have something like that? Because I wouldn't, and I don't.
Well, that was weird.
I think it's dang sweet that Hank's mom has a picture of a teenage Hank right there in her kitchen. Tilly's reaction makes Hank suspicious, so he decides to ask his dad instead. But Cotton once again proves to be a jackass and says,
You think I got enough room in this cracker box for your baby crap?
Well, maybe you could have kept my birth certificate and tossed out some of those videos.
Those videos are of GH. They mean something to me.
Never mind the fact that I think it's weird that Hank wouldn't have needed his birth certificate at some point in his adult life to, I don't know, apply for his driver's license, apply for a passport, and subsequent renewals. One could come up with explanations as to how he could circumvent that, so I won't dwell on it. At least I don't have to worry because I was born in Texas, and I can prove it. Anyway, these reactions make Hank even more suspicious, and Peggy gets it into his head that his parents are keeping the secret that he may be adopted.
My dad hates adopted children.
Exactly.
When he starts talking it out, it seems more and more plausible.
My mom wouldn't just hang up on me for no reason. God, maybe I really am adopted.
And Hank comes to the horrific realization that his name might have really been Henry, or even
Chris. God, Peggy, what if I'm a Chris?
Would it be so bad, Hank? I've known both great and awful people that were named Chris. So Hank decides to take matters into his own hands and consults Dale to use the internet to obtain the records. Before that, Hank briefly dreams that he's actually Tom Landry's son.
I do have his strong chin and love for the flex defense. I wonder if I would have called him Dad or Coach. Ah, who am I kidding? It would have been Sir.
But Dale gets down to business and has Hank fill in his social security number to download the birth certificate copy, confirming that his parents are indeed Cotton and Tilly. This relieves Hank since he can still love his mother with a good conscience, but is horrified to discover...
Place of birth, New York, New York?
Okay, this must have been one of the craziest twists in the series ever. I mean, the die-hard Texan himself, Hank Hill, not even born on Texas soil, and even worse, born in a place that's the exact opposite of Texas in every way. So Hank goes to his father to demand to know the truth, which he humorously tries to deflect.
You was adopted. Yeah. Oh, worst $50 I ever spent. Could have got me a matching pair of Chinese babies for 10.
Cotton recounts the story that he took Tilly to New York City to see the sights while she was pregnant with Hank. So they have a romantic evening out, having a fancy dinner and dancing, which causes her to go into labor.
I never told you because I didn't think you were man enough to handle it. Not being born in Texas, you weren't.
Hear, hear. So now that Hank knows the quote-unquote truth, Cotton urges Hank not to go to his mother with the truth since it would upset her. After Hank leaves, Cotton immediately begins conspiring with some old war buddies. Later that night, Hank is lamenting to Peggy about the revelation. Peggy wisely inquires that if being born in Texas is so important, why did he marry her?
I didn't marry you right away. Believe me, I had to pray on it.
Peggy points out that it shouldn't matter since in the eyes of God, everyone is equal.
Nothing in there about New York.
Well, Sodom is in there, Hank, and Gomorrah, and they are New York as all get out.
That is a dang clever line. This show's writing is so brilliant. In the next scene, we can logically infer that Dale blabbed to everyone about Hank's origins and they start teasing him for it. And word apparently travels fast because Bobby learns of it at school. But of course, Bobby is excited to know that someone in the family is technically from New York. Oh boy, just wait until he finds out he's related to ZZ Top.
Ever think about moving back?
No.
Yeah, Bobby, people from Texas don't move to New York, it's the other way around. Meanwhile, Cotton is getting together with his old war buddies, obviously planning something nefarious. And the next day, Dale has already sprung into action to tease Hank further.
Damn it, Dale.
And he's already prepared to keep it going. How long was he under the truck? Talk about dedication. I think Dale is more of a jerk to Hank than Con sometimes. On the way to wherever Hank is going, he starts slipping with this Texas trivia.
Wait a sec. I know this. Dang it.
And then he gets heckled by a stereotype.
Go back to New York!
Back at home, Hank is still lamenting at the fact that he wasn't born in Texas and starts questioning his ability to even drive a truck. Fed up, he calls his mother to let her know he knows the truth.
Wait, Con's trying to pin this on me? It was his idea to go to New York.
What? Well, then one of you is not telling the truth.
But, well, Hank should know by now who his dad is. Tilly tells the real story that she was dragged to New York to a baseball game at Yankee Stadium. She was used to get through the police line so Cotton could attempt to assassinate Fidel Castro.
Woman with fetus coming through!
Oh, if only that line was as effective today. And now we see where Cotton first began resenting his son.
Have a cigar, you weak-chinned Cuban son of a bitch!
And shockingly, it doesn't work, and Tilly runs off to the ladies' room to give birth to Hank.
I was born in the ladies' room at Yankee Stadium?
Yeah. You also prevented another world war, Hank. That's a good thing. Back with Cotton, we see a bit more of how his plan is coming together.
And at midnight, we rendezvous in San Antonio with one Jorge Lopez. As you know, he's half Mexican, half Cuban. For this job, we'll be using the half that's Cuban.
Foolproof. So they're planning something devious and begin discussing their getaway means. Just then, Hank bursts in, using what I can only describe as excellent deduction skills and knowing his father would be at the VFW in the middle of the night.
It's your fault I was born in New York and I can't drive my truck and I tried a bagel and I actually liked it.
I like bagels too, Hank. There's no shame in that. But at the mention of Hank's truck, Cotton decides that Hank will be the patsy in their grand plan, so he calls off the very blatant attempt of murdering Hank. Wow, this episode almost got really dark. Cotton feigns guilt.
I spent these last 40 years tearing myself up for letting my first son be born outside Texas. Oh, if I could just shove you back in your mother and do it all over again in Texas, I would.
Let's not mince words here, Hank would totally go for it. So Cotton convinces Hank to have a guy's night out and insists that they all drive in Hank's truck. Of course, Hank is up for it, and the veterans cleverly start setting up Hank to take the fall. They also go on an ammunition shopping spree and tell him they're going to a barbecue joint in the middle of the night.
Barbecue at midnight? Well, good luck finding that in Manhattan.
Well, I've never been to New York, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you probably can. I don't know. On the way to San Antonio, they start liquoring up Hank and they come up upon the Alamo. Cotton begins the final phase of his patsy plan and sets up Hank to take a photo in front of the Alamo holding up a newspaper and a gun. Just saying here, I've been to the Alamo several times. I even lived in San Antonio in my youth, and it's not gated off like that, but you can bet your buns there's around-the-clock security. Anyway, Lopez arrives.
That's Lopez?
He knows too much.
And then the men decide it's time to remove Hank from impeding them from their master plan, so they tie his hands up and Cotton just has to give him one more insult.
And you ain't a Texan. You're a patsy from New York.
Ouch. And Cotton tells him their grand plan was to kill Fidel Castro, who was indeed still alive when this episode aired.
Lopez, take his clothes. Stinky, throw him over the fence.
I don't know why Hank didn't just run. Pretty sure he could have outrun them or fought them off decently, hands tied or not. And I have a hard time figuring out how these old men could hoist Hank up and throw him over the gate. And I suppose the writers did too, since it just cuts to black. But either way, he's left behind the gate and abandoned. Okay, Dale. So Hank makes his way into the Alamo and lays on the floor. I can only assume he was there for a few hours, considering he seems pretty sobered up at this point, despite drinking a bunch of tequila. He finds a light switch and sees a bunch of flags.
These 32 flags honor the birthplaces of the Alamo Defenders.
And Ireland is on there too, so I can say I fought against myself. Also, Arkansas is spelled wrong. And Hank notices...
Kentucky, Tennessee, Ohio, New York. New York? They were born across America, but they died Texas heroes.
Across the country? Didn't realize Ireland was a state, unless you count Massachusetts. But I digress. This is actually a very poignant moment. If you ever go to the Alamo, you can take a tour there, and there is a short movie that details the sacrifice of the Alamo defenders. This moment drives home the point that it doesn't matter where they were from, it matters how they lived and how they died. That made them Texas heroes. The New Yorker that died at the Alamo was named Louis Duval, and he grew up in Manhattan. He left New York amidst the abolitionist riots and cholera epidemics and immigrated to Texas, working as a blacksmith, plasterer, and mason. He died at the Battle of the Alamo at the age of 24. Hank looks at his surroundings and finds a statue of Jim Bowie, using the knife to cut his ties. And just throwing this out there, Jim Bowie was the naming inspiration for a famous British musician named David Robert Jones, better known as David Bowie. Okay, plowing ahead. Hank finds Davy Crockett's statue that is fully clothed as opposed to Mr. Bowie there, and he steals the clothes.
Why am I wearing the hat?
I love that part. And how'd Hank get back over the fence? Also, why not take a t-shirt or something? They totally sell those there. You didn't have to pillage poor Davy Crockett. So Hank uses his excellent deductive reasoning skills and knows that his father is in Corpus Christi and knows the exact dock he was at. The men are loading up their boat with the ammunition and Hank arrives to intercept them.
Well, I suppose you're... Sucker punch!
There's a brief tussle, and Hank is knocked into the water. And probably gets brain damage. And we get this surprisingly wholesome moment of Cotton actually caring about Hank.
Stinky, you better get him.
Where is he? Where is he?
Don't shoot him! Jump in and save him!
Aww. Hank reveals he took the spark plugs out, thwarting the assassination attempt once and for all.
We don't need spark plugs. We'll row to Cuba. Well, that's how they get here.
I'm not saying a word. It also appears that his friends are getting cold feet.
And it's puzzle day at the rec center. I'm gonna finish that sumbitch lighthouse.
Fine, you sissy girls. I'll do the job myself. Hell, I'll swim to Cuba with this wrench between my teeth. Then I'll pose as a beautiful female plumber. And then, when a toilet clogs in the presidential palace, oh, I just wanted to kill Castro.
I'm surprised they made it even this far, to be honest. And Hank is surprisingly supportive, almost being set up for murder and all. And this wasn't even the first time either. Hank is way too forgiving, to tell you the truth. So the men get picked up by the relatives and taken home. And Peggy helps rationalize to Hank.
Hank, informed sources tell me that you were dead in the water, and then you came back to life, so you were reborn in Texas, which means you are now a native Texan.
No, I'm not a native Texan. I'm just a Texan.
And Peggy says that she, too, is a Texan, which, yeah, it's true. She lives there and calls it her home. But Hank kind of ruins it, disregarding the lesson he just learned.
I don't remember seeing any Montana flag at the Alamo.
Well, it wasn't a state yet.
Fine, fine, everybody's a Texan. Change planes in Dallas, you're a Texan.
From that last bit, you can infer that Hank was indeed rationalizing that since a man from New York died in the Battle of the Alamo, he could still consider himself a Texan. And it's very fitting that he didn't need to affix the native prefix to it either, because even if he wasn't born on Texas soil, Hank still embodies the ideals of what he believes to be a pure Texan. And I can agree, finding out he was born in New York didn't mean he couldn't drive his truck, he couldn't enjoy his barbecues and pecan pies, his 10-gallon hats. He is a Texan through and through, and his place of birth was not going to make him into a different person. We can't decide where we're born, but we can decide where we live. Now we move on to the more controversial Season 7 episode, Goodbye Normal Jeans. You know, for the rap that I give Season 7, I sure do discuss episodes from that season a lot. Despite being a small channel, I've gotten a number of requests to review this episode. I'm not sure if it's because it's a popular episode detailing how awful Peggy can be, or because it's just one of the many great Thanksgiving episodes the show has. Well, let's just dive on in and see for ourselves. We begin with Bobby in home economics class using the iron for non-ironing purposes.
I'm ironing underwater. Bloop, bloop, bloop.
Don't test me, young man. I failed funnier kids than you.
It's pretty funny that this teacher, due to her age, has likely seen other class clowns in her time and possibly has given credit to funnier kids. The teacher announces that the next assignment will be to identify and clean a mystery stain on a cheerleader's uniform.
And here's one for our class clown. Oh, wait, let me give you some extra credit.
This lady is sour milk, I tell ya. I'm sure there's a story there with the janitor licking her pinky like that. Ew. Later that night, Peggy is making her Monday night meal of Frito pie with Wolf Brand chili. I'll tell you here and now, they did used to make Frito pie at my elementary school for lunch, and it wasn't very good. At least I don't remember it being very good. I was never a Fritos gal myself. Anyway, Hank calls Bobby for dinner and sees him with the cheerleading outfit.
There better be a naked cheerleader under your bed.
Oh, and that would make it better, Hank?
I think I'm gonna fail home ec.
Well, of course you're failing home ec. You're a guy.
Okay, so would you be more proud if there was a naked cheerleader under his bed or that he's failing a girly class, Hank? This man, my goodness. And Hank asks Peggy if she knew Bobby was taking home ec. Well, isn't that something you should know too, Hank?
If Bobby learns to cook and clean for himself, what's his motivation to ever get married?
Boy, I could go on and on about how backwards this sentiment is in a contemporary context, but it is important to remember that it is in character for both Hank and Peggy. Referring back to the Valentine's Day episode with Mono, there was a clear mutual takeaway that their early relationship was saved because Hank didn't know that Peggy didn't know how to cook, implying Hank wasn't going to learn himself.
Home ec is not going to turn Bobby into a sissy. In prison movies, the toughest characters always work in the kitchen.
I can't argue that. I've seen Goodfellas. Now I'm hungry. And in the next scene, it's implied that Hank was talking to his friends about the whole idea.
When I was the, varsity football towel manager, I cleaned 50 jock straps a week. I turned out okay.
The subtle takeaway here is that without a proper towel manager, the team is at a huge disadvantage, as seen in the episode The Sun Also Roses. So Dale could have made the point that it is important to have someone in charge of the more day-to-day responsibilities of the home, as that is the backbone of any group. Then we get into the small subplot of this episode. It doesn't really go anywhere, so I'll just breeze through its genesis. Bill makes a shot of an empty can into the cooler. Dale bets $1 million he can't do it again. Bill accepts and loses. Back at home, Peggy is helping Bobby with the homework, and you can see that the jeans fall back into the machine. Peggy walks Bobby through her method of how to attack this stain.
First, you blindside it with press soak. Then, you sucker punch it with some hot water. And just when it's begging for mercy, you rip off its head and pour bleach down its neck.
That's intense, Peggy. Bobby excitedly starts the machine, and the next day they're met with a nice surprise. And the outfit is tattered up with holes and rugged edges. I've always been curious as to how a machine did that in one cycle. I've been doing laundry since I was 12, and I've never thought it capable of messing up clothes like that, unless the spin cycle was going 1,000 miles an hour. If any of y'all had a machine that could do that, please enlighten me. It's at this moment that Peggy discovers that Hank's jeans were left in the wash. Again, how did a machine make all of those holes? The splotches of bleach stains I can understand, but those look like they've been through war. And Hank is noticeably upset. But I can't help but laugh at the fact that these are his only jeans. He really doesn't have a pair or two on standby.
Now what am I going to carve the turkey in? My underwear? Not with an electric knife, no sir.
Well, Hank, you grilled burgers naked, so why not? Peggy apologizes and admits fault in the most Peggy way possible.
Even world-famous surgeons do not get it right 100% of the time. They make mistakes, Hank. People die. We're human.
In the next scene, we see that Bobby got a passing grade despite ruining that cheerleading outfit, and he asks for help.
Can you help me fix my dad's pants?
And in a very mature moment for Bobby, he humbles himself in front of his teacher.
Please, Miss Bittner, I've never asked for anything from you, except more sugar.
And this seems to satisfy her, and she takes a look with what she has to work with.
Ooh, fancy. Hey, Hank, how's it going at the bank?
How the hell should I know?
I freaking love it. Hank just answers it completely straight. I love this show. And it's here we get a continuation of the bet Bill lost, and he writes a check for $1 million, implying that it's meant to just be framed. But Dale doesn't seem to understand that. The next scene, Bobby surprises Hank with a brand new pair of jeans.
I got a bolt of denim from Miss Bittner. I used your old jeans as a pattern, and I fired up Mom's sewing machine.
I'm pretty shocked Bobby was able to make a new pair of jeans by himself after one day, or maybe the teacher helped him. Either way, Hank tries them on and is impressed.
Well, all right, Bobby. They're perfect. I mean, they're a little stiff, but after I break them in for a couple years, they'll be perfect.
That line is funny, but I wore some pairs of jeans for over a decade, so makes sense. Bobby also uses a power sander to loosen up the denim, and Hank is even more impressed.
I can feel the denim loosening up. I'm glad you ruined my jeans. Bobby's made them even better.
And this doesn't sit well with Peggy, as you can imagine. Hank gives Bobby some praise later that day as he walks in.
8 hours and no chafing. I know what I'm leading off with in my Thanksgiving prayer.
Which annoys Peggy even more. Bobby is in the kitchen making a meal of his own, and Hank discovers he's also cooking in the class as well. Bobby mentions he used a bottle of the wedding wine to marinate the pot roast, and just to let y'all know, not all wine needs to be aged and sitting on a shelf, otherwise it'll turn into vinegar, especially if it's already been opened. Hank tells Bobby it's all good, but to make sure Peggy has the space to make Tuesday night pork chops.
Because with pork, the slightest mistake could kill us all.
Didn't realize pork's danger was in such close proximity to a blowfish. Anyway, in the next scene, Dale tries to cash the check and is told that there isn't enough money to cover the full amount.
Most of the $1 million checks we see are jokes.
Your job sounds fun.
I'm sorry, Mr. Dotterive only has $418.75.
Now, I don't know what's worse, the fact that Dale would stoop so low as to try cashing $1 million check from his obviously not millionaire friend, or the fact that this bank lady not only tells Dale the exact amount that's in the account, but actually clears out the account despite the fact the check far exceeds the balance. Is this her first day or something?
Then give me 400 Sacagawea coins, 18 Susan B. Anthony's, 2 North Carolina quarters, and a Utah.
I guess it isn't. That night, we see Hank almost struggle to get that dry-ass looking pork chop down.
Tastes like Tuesday.
And Bobby comes in with an impressive looking roast, which leads me to ask where Bobby got the money to just up and buy a hunk of meat like that. Then again, it is Hank's house, so he probably had that in the freezer or something. Bobby asks Hank to sign a form saying that his pot roast was good, and Hank enthusiastically agrees. I can infer that the assignment was to cook a meal for the family home, which is a good assignment for the class, though I can only hope the meal wasn't specified and Bobby decided to make that elaborate-looking roast of his own accord, and also prepared it in the beginning of the day, seeing as how roast can take a while to cook, especially one that size. Oh, and have time to marinate it too. Despite Peggy's protests that Hank would spoil his appetite for the pork chops, he keeps eating it anyway, insisting that the pork chops will taste the same tomorrow.
No. Wednesday is Spa Peggy and Meatballs Day. You can't have pork chops on Wednesday. That would throw off the whole rotation.
Peggy gets mad at the suggestion, but then again, I understand the frustration of having food go bad if it's not used in time. Get a vacuum sealer, Peggy. Peggy is venting to Nancy about Hank eating Bobby's much more delicious meal over her bland-looking weeknight meal. This is where the cracks with Peggy start to show in this episode. I don't see why Hank eating the pot roast that Bobby made was a bad thing. It was for school, and Bobby took it upon himself to make a meal for the family. I'm not sure why Peggy even bothered making dinner, considering that roast looked big enough to feed the entire family. I'd be jumping for joy if my kids wanted to make dinner of their own volition. So Nancy tells Peggy she should get ideas from a homemaking magazine and attempts to recreate a DIY centerpiece made out of a bunch of junk. And unsurprisingly, it doesn't work well.
Hank, it is not yard waste. Or it will not be when I get through with it. It will be our new, stunning Thanksgiving centerpiece, made entirely of yard waste.
I'm 90% sure you're supposed to use imitation outdoor ornaments from a craft store to pull this off. I can't see a magazine suggesting you raid a poor bird's nest. The other 10% you should just buy the complete centerpiece.
They'll build another nest. They're not just going to let their eggs sit there on the sidewalk.
Yikes, Peggy. The next scene, Peggy is getting her hair done, and her stylist, Ernst, voiced by Toby Huss, pretty much doing a more flamboyant version of Khan, says he can tell there's something on her mind.
Ernst, imagine if the man you love found someone else to cook for him and clean for him and make his pants.
When we get to the twist later on in this episode, you realize how brilliantly this dialogue plays out.
Who is this other woman?
The other woman is my son. Yeah, he may be getting an A in home ec, but at what cost, huh? At what cost to me?
Ernst tells her that all Bobby is doing is cooking and cleaning, but as a wife, there's something only she can do for Hank, and he tells her he'll give her a new hairstyle to tantalize him. Now we get a continuation of Bill's plot line, and he can't buy Thanksgiving groceries because Dale cleaned out his account. I thought Bill had a credit card. Either way, Bill can't afford anything, but does this on the way out. Bobby makes an adorable knit cozy for Hank's circular saw, and it's such a Hank thing to like it that he doesn't even care about Bobby doing the girly stuff. Peggy arrives home sporting her new hairstyle, and Hank is impressed.
Whoa, your hair looks great. It's so big.
Well, I hope it's not too tall to get through the bedroom door, Hank.
Well, the doorway's got a 7-foot clearance.
Oh, Hank. Bobby calls them for dinner, and Peggy is surprised. Not sure why, she's been getting her hair done well into the early evening. Makes perfect sense they'd start to make something.
The sooner we eat, the sooner we can get to dessert.
I think Bobby made pie.
Well, at least both of you were talking about eating pie. We immediately cut to after dinner when Hank and Peggy are preparing for bed. Wish we could have seen Bobby's dinner spread. Oh well. And Hank tells a lie.
I'm not usually a big fan of cheese.
So Peggy tries to seduce Hank, but Hank gets a whiff of her hair.
Ugh.
What's wrong? Is Bobby's cooking coming up on you?
Peggy actually hopes Bobby's cooking would make them sick. My goodness. Either way, Peggy is turned off and Hank just rolls over.
Boy, that cheese.
I really want to know what Bobby did with that cheese. Later on in the evening, Hank starts to pull the two beds apart since the fumes from Peggy's hair is making it difficult to sleep. What the heck did Ernst put in her hair that was different than what he usually does?
You don't smell like a new car. I just said that to make you feel better.
Fed up, Peggy leaves the room and sees Bobby doing some housework in the middle of the night. Bobby here is trying to shampoo the couch, which I think would wake everyone up in the middle of the night anyway.
I need the couch. Your father's feeling ill. I think it was something he ate.
Since he's cleaning the couch, Bobby gives up his bed for Peggy to sleep. I like how he doesn't even entertain the idea that his cooking is what is making Hank sick.
Fine. I will sleep in your bed, right under your booger wall.
Hate to say it twice in one episode, but ew. As Bobby finishes up the couch, Hank comes out and sees Bobby.
I thought I heard an upholstery shampooer.
You sure about that, Hank? Because that thing is awfully quiet. Shampooers, in my experience, are pretty loud. Hank suggests using it to get the hair product smell out of Peggy's bed and asks where she is. Bobby tells her that she's sleeping in his bed and that he'll sleep on the couch in his poncho since it's still wet. As a quick note, I love the little detail of the water in the shampooer is now brown from the dirt Bobby cleaned out of it when it was blue before. Nice work, animators. Hank tells Bobby that they can bunk together.
I'll make caramel popcorn.
I'll turn on the TV. Such a clear night, we might be able to pick up the news from San Antonio.
Wow, this is a pretty nice Hank and Bobby moment. There is not a shortage of good Hank and Bobby moments in this show, but it's nice that they have just a nice one-on-one time in the home, just chilling in front of the TV and eating popcorn.
I didn't know your bed was made of two little beds.
Well, your mother likes her mattress firm, and I like mine extra firm. So I guess it's true. Opposites attract.
Yeah, I guess that's a nice solution, but did you have to buy separate headboards too, instead of just buying one solid piece bed frame? Anyway, Hank calls Ladybird to join them instead of Peggy, and it starts grating on her even more. Now here, I am pretty sympathetic to Peggy. I would feel pretty snubbed if my husband called the dog instead of me. The next morning, Peggy wakes up and sees that Bobby made breakfast already and didn't clean up as he went along. She asks how their evening went, and Hank replies,
Bobby and I were up all night talking. Really talking.
Okay, why would this make her mad? Peggy spent much of the series trying to get Hank and Bobby to spend time together. Maybe she's just upset that it wasn't something she actively facilitated, except when she ruined Hank's jeans. In her frustration, Peggy sees the homemaking magazine and rats Bobby out.
Look what I found in Bobby's bed. It's a ladies' magazine, and that is not my opinion. It says so right in the title. You were right about home ec, Hank. It's ruining Bobby.
Hank turns it around, though.
Bobby, get in here, now.
What's up, Dad?
Son, do you think you could make this buttermilk-basted turkey?
Well, that recipe takes 24 hours. Good thing I started on it last night.
The interactions in this house must be practically nil if Bobby's able to covertly start cooking the Thanksgiving meal without anyone noticing. And Hank is impressed at Bobby's planning and tells Peggy that they should just let Bobby handle the entire thing.
You know what? Let's have Bobby handle the whole meal.
What? But every year
This year, the only thing you have to do is get hungry. Just kick back on the couch.
And this scene is actually the crux of why I'm not dropping the hammer on Peggy as much as many others in this episode. I'll elaborate further later. Bobby asks Peggy to put the turkey in the oven, and she angrily does, then decides that
they do not deserve us.
She takes the turkey and tries to flee, but sees the truck is in the way. She spots the bike, and thankfully Bill comes to distract them.
I can't buy any Thanksgiving food because my bank account is empty and I can't remember what I spent it on.
I can only assume Dale was waiting there the entire time for Bill to show up, given his impeccable timing.
That check was a joke! Just like the bet, it was a joke!
Yet you endorsed it anyway, Bill! Hank tells Dale to give Bill his money back, which, yeah, that was a jerk thing to do, cleaning out his friend's bank account like that. Anyway, Peggy flees with the turkey and is distracted by the happy families and falls down. And I guess everyone doesn't bother asking if she's okay, but instead just stares at her. Anyway, Peggy makes her way to her hairstylist's loft. I don't know how she would know where he lives. Maybe they are really just good friends. She has been seeing him regularly and is mentioned in Hank's bad hair day.
Why don't you go ahead and take my 1 o'clock with Ernst tomorrow? Do not be late unless you want the coldest shampoo of your life.
Ernst answers the door and sees Peggy's disheveled state, believing Hank ravished her. He asks what she did for him, and Peggy admits she stole the turkey. Then we get some more clever dialogue play.
I would rather share it with a man who needs me. A man who is also alone on Thanksgiving because of the stigma society attaches to his unconventional sexual appetites.
Get in here, you drama queen. Tell me, who is this mystery man?
Peggy, clearly thinking her stylist is gay up until this point, sees Ernst's wife and son. Aw, cute family.
You have a family that loves you?
I'm almost saddened that Peggy automatically assumed that if her stylist was gay, he'd be alone and have no family that would love him. I get it, it's Texas, but it's not like deep South Texas. Heck, my old apartment was near Oak Lawn in Dallas, and the streets were painted with rainbows year-round. So this seems to devastate Peggy, despite the fact that she too has a family that loves her and can't seem to understand that. Nor does she seem to understand that she abandoned them and took the food with her. Ernst calls the Hill home and Hank answers. And Hank, despite Ernst not mentioning that he's Peggy's stylist, already asks if the call is about Peggy's hair, so maybe he is pretty close with the family. Ernst tells Hank that Peggy is at his home with the turkey, to which Hank just notices the oven is empty.
Your mother took the turkey and ran off to her hairdresser's.
Let's add that to funny lines, especially out of context. Ernst explains to him that Peggy is at his house in a sad state. He very clearly verbalizes to Hank that
You have made her feel useless in her own house. Now she is in my house, laying face down in a puddle of her own self-esteem. Pull her out before she drowns.
Ernst is a bro. Okay, so I guess Bobby feels pretty upset that his mom and turkey are gone, and Hank gives Bobby these instructions.
Bobby, I need you to do 2 things I pray you'll never have to do again. Tape the Cowboys game and give me an apron.
Ernst drops Peggy off back at home, and Hank greets her, letting her know he sent Bobby to the neighbors. He also tells her he whipped up their favorite dishes.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Fried pork chops? Frito pie with Wolf Brand chili? Spa Peggy with meatballs?
And a half a bottle of our wedding wine.
You don't even need me to make Spa Peggy?
Nope, I guess not. But that's okay. I didn't marry you because I need someone to cook and clean for me. I married you because, you know, the love.
And while Hank isn't at fault for Peggy feeling the way she does, because he's really that oblivious, he explains perfectly to her that Peggy isn't just a person that cooks and cleans for the family. They don't need her to make certain meals to make them special. She's special because the family loves her and she cares about them. She's beyond just the family's cook. She's the wife and the mother. Peggy's identity is very much rooted in being a good mother. And you can disagree with me as much as you want, but I do think Peggy is a good mother. She takes care of Bobby, is much more supportive of him and his interests than Hank, works to help support the home, took in her niece and became a motherly figure to her, took up another job when Hank lost his. This episode isn't a case of Peggy being jealous of Bobby, even though that seems to be a common takeaway. Stealing Bobby's turkey because she was jealous.
Stealing Bobby's turkey because she was jealous.
This episode is a case study in how many of us attribute huge facets of our identity to our day-to-day lives, and when that pattern is disrupted or even usurped, you suddenly feel cast adrift. And in the case where Peggy is the one that handles the big family meals for a holiday, to be suddenly told, no, don't do it this time, without even asking, I think that's very inconsiderate. I wouldn't go so far as to say she was justified in stealing the turkey, because she wasn't, but I think there are issues between Hank and Peggy clearly communicating how they feel. Peggy with her feeling that Bobby is encroaching too much on her daily tasks, and Hank with Peggy's hair smelling funny. It's a good thing Ernst was able to listen to Peggy openly vent her frustrations and verbalize to Hank what she's feeling, and Hank was able to understand how Peggy feels and not be angry at her for acting the way she did. It wasn't about being jealous of Bobby. It was about the fact that all of her responsibilities she performs were no longer relevant. It's never implied that Peggy resents the fact that she's the one responsible for cooking and cleaning the household, so when Hank tells her that Bobby should just take over, it's very inconsiderate. Let's not forget that this isn't the first time Peggy has had such an issue. Peggy's Turtle Song shared some similar elements in that Peggy was guilted by Hank into thinking her working kept her out of the home, which, by some great reach, is what caused Bobby's misdiagnosed ADD. When Peggy didn't work, she suddenly didn't know what to do with her time. There's also the episode Peggy, The Decline and Fall, where Peggy was unable to do anything for herself or her family.
I was once one of the finest mothers in the state of Texas, and now I can't even wipe a baby.
I don't think it's an accident that this episode's title is a play on the lyrics from the song Candle in the Wind, where the opening line is Goodbye Norma Jean, or possibly the 1976 film of the same name. Norma Jean was the birth name of a little-known actress by the name of Marilyn Monroe, a person whose life is still the subject of fascination over 60 years after her death. A person whose outlook was characterized as being self-conscious and worrisome, that she'd never be seen as anything more than what the Hollywood studio made her out to be. And even today, we are mostly shown the actress Marilyn, rather than the person, Norma. Peggy's identity is firmly rooted in being a good mother, just as much as Hank's is in being a Texan. But the root of these episodes is that arbitrary requirements to satisfactorily fulfill that identity are subjective in nature, and even if it can't be done in the way they're used to, they can be fulfilled in other ways as long as you embody the spirit. Peggy couldn't help take care of G.H., but she could do something that no one else in the household could, and that was rock him to sleep. And everyone gathered around and saw this supposedly incapacitated woman care for a baby. So what if Hank wasn't really born in Texas? And so what if Peggy isn't needed to make spaghetti? That does not fundamentally change who they are as people. I'm by no means an authority on how one's identity is established, but I don't think it's healthy to attribute most of it to things beyond our control. We don't have control over where we were born or how other people will act and view us. We only have control over the things we do as individuals and how we manage our day-to-day lives. We have control over how we interact with others and how we prepare our food. I'm a Texan by birth and by current choice, but there are also 2 points in my life where I was a Californian and once a Nevadan. Actually a Las Vegasite, which is the best part about Nevada. And above all that, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a gamer, I'm an avid King of the Hill fan, and so much more. But to you fine folks, I am Harvey McLeod, and I'm here to make videos for you. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.